First, they came for the socialist, and I did not speak out because I was not a socialist. Then they came for the trade unionist, and I did not speak out because I was not a trade unionist. Then they came for the Jews, and I did not speak out because I was not a Jew. Then they came for me, and there was no one left to speak for me. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen. This is Aaron Burr from the Free Thought Doctrine, and you are listening to the Aaron Burr Broadcast, Episode 5. I have been pressured by at least one person to apologize and condemn what happened at the Capitol a few days ago, and to denounce those that quote-unquote stormed the Capitol. However, although I do not agree with what happened, I will not join the hordes of conservative media pundits and conservative milquetoast Republicans tripping over themselves, trying to sound the most adamant and sincere about condemning the actions of an unruly, unarmed crowd. The fact of the matter is, no matter what they say, the left and the media will paint them with the same brush as the perpetrators, period. There is no reciprocation. We have all seen the videos by now, and it is in my estimation, there were opportunist agitators among the crowds who were hell-bent on creating mischief and chaos, and obviously succeeded in their endeavors. The fact of the matter is, there were literally hundreds of thousands of people in peaceful protests in D.C. that day, and a relatively small percentage of those people managed to enter the Capitol building that fateful day. From my observations, I believe this event was largely staged with the use of agent provocateurs who are very possibly Antifa or deep state plants. It is a fact that it only takes a small number of manipulators to lead a crowd of unwitting participants into a situation or direction they did not intend to go. I think this is evident when you see images of people dressed all in black, smashing windows, breaking past barriers, and climbing walls. Then there are countless videos of police officers calmly standing by at entrances, guiding people in as if they are letting them into a theme park like Disneyland or something. And the majority of people seemed bewildered and were bumbling around taking selfies. Despite the constant lies and propaganda from the corporate-run media, this in no way appears to be an armed insurrection or a failed insurrection or an attempted coup. First and most importantly, they were unarmed. If this was a true insurrection as they claim, there would have been mass firefights, people being held hostage, mass destruction, and the building would have been probably burned down. Honestly, it looks like they're just having a party. The fact of the matter is, if the question is, do I care about a bunch of unarmed agitators and nitwits walking to a den of thieves and criminals? The answer is no. No, I really don't. I really do feel that this whole event was largely orchestrated by the corrupt power structure in order to crack down and target the centers of the state. It has given the elite order license to go after anybody that opposes their narrative, whatever their narrative may be. Which basically is, if you support Trump or any of his causes or issues with the election, then you are inciting violence, and you incited the riot at the Capitol. And especially the corporate-run media driving their narrative home nonstop on the news, and it is working. Some of my own friends have reacted with sayings like, the police should have mowed down all those sheep, or they should have authorized deadly force. Okay, so you wanted the police to gun down a bunch of unarmed people for trespassing. And they are saying things like they need to round up all the leaders of all these protests and arrest them for treason, and so on, and so on, and so on. Most disturbing was the execution of the unarmed woman, who I have heard people call obscene names and saying how she deserved it. Again, an unarmed woman. It is unbelievable, if you ask me. It really just seems a situation where the powers that be have just created this chaos. Because out of chaos is order. And what I absolutely reject and refuse to give is more power to the state. But that is what is happening right now and is going to continue to happen. Once President-elect Biden takes over and we have one-party rule, expect a scorched earth agenda that will include a new Patriot Act on steroids that will result in a massive increase in the size and scope of the security state and the surveillance state. Even right now as I speak, and has gone down in the last 24 to 48 hours, the state has colluded with big tech to purge thousands and thousands of Trump supporters and conservatives from social media platforms like Twitter, to include the sitting president himself, Trump. Look, big tech may be private companies, but what makes it scary is the fact they are essentially taking orders from people in the government to act. And when big government and big business come together as one giant monolith and collude, you have real fascism. And I have said it before, I will always stand against the mass centralization and mass concentration of power against the individual. And the countless people I personally know and have seen that are cheering this on is completely frightening. There literally seem to be authoritarians everywhere who take delight in business and government crushing individuals. And I'll refer to the opening of this episode where I read the Then They Came For Me poem, a poem that is inscribed at the National Holocaust Museum. And my point in reading that is just the amount of ignorance of people that cheer on these iron-fisted actions that are taken out against people that disagree with them. That is only to their own detriment. Whatever happened to what liberals used to say in the 60s, I may disagree with you, but I will defend to the death your right to say it. How far we have come. Another thing I want to mention is the nonstop hypocrisy coming from those in power and the media, comparing what happened to 9/11, or worse than 9/11, or Pearl Harbor. Get the hell out of here. This whole summer, cities across America were burning with constant rioting, looting, arson, assaults on citizens, assaults on police officers, and just wanton destruction of private property, including in D.C., and including monuments and statues. And for the very most part, the same people who are screaming about what happened at the Capitol now were literally cheering on what happened in the summer and giving justifications for all of it. Now, just a week or so ago, I made a podcast about how, to many people, government is God. And now, what have you been hearing nonstop since this all happened? Phrases like cathedral of democracy, or how Pelosi put it, the temple of democracy. And you just hear all these words like sacred, revered, and so on. Literally only proving my point. But if they want to go there, then fine. I liken it to that story in the Bible, and I'm no Bible expert, but there is that story of how Jesus enters a temple and gets angry at what he sees, and he flips tables and uses the phrase, den of thieves. And I harken back to the point I made earlier on this show. I'm sorry, but I'm not going to be that upset when an unarmed crowd waltz into a den of thieves and criminals and basically flip some tables. And my last point before I go, I think it is detestable how some people, including President-elect Biden, have thrown race into the mix. Like I have mentioned before, the same people yelling unity, 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 just can't help themselves and inject race literally into every single issue. Again, people were not running into the Capitol, destroying everything in sight and looting everything and trying to burn the place down. A woman was shot to death, for crying out loud, an unarmed woman. How many quote-unquote protesters this summer were shot point blank by the police with lethal rounds? I just did a whole episode about how the police were standing by as people were destroying small businesses, and in many cases, they were even kneeling with the protesters. And let's just imagine for 1 second that the protesters at the Capitol were BLM and the unarmed woman who was killed was black. Let's be real. The outcry and outrage would be deafening. There would be murals and memorials of her and riots burning down our cities in her name. And we would all know the name of the cop that shot her and would be demanding his arrest. At the end of the day, we know it's okay to riot, loot, rob, and kill your neighbor. But how dare you walk into the people's house and scare these holy politicians? And you've been listening to the Burr Broadcast on the Free Thought Doctrine.